I'm going to give you a situation which has gone 42 and 10, 81% the last 17 years in college football, and it applies once again to the Army Navy game this Saturday. I'm going to let you know how to play this game and make some money when you do so. Hi, this is Steve Merrill, wagertalk.com, right back here on Wager Talk TV, breaking down the Army Navy game this Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern on CBS, taking place in Boston, Massachusetts, Gillette Stadium, Foxborough, Massachusetts to be exact, home of the New England Patriots. And boy, it's anything like the New England Patriot game last week, a 6-0, the lowest scoring NFL game in over 5 years. Maybe we get some value with the under once again, and that's the situation I'm going to talk about. In fact, when service academies play each other, going back to 2006, and courtesy of Ralph Michaels at wagertalk.com for digging this up earlier this season, we talked about it when Navy and Air Force and Army and Air Force played. The under is 42 and 10 in all service academy games going back to 2006. And guess what? Perfect 2-0 already this season, with both Air Force Army and Air Force Navy staying under the total. Now, with that said, most of those totals over the past couple decades have been much higher than the posted total for this game. In fact, this is the lowest total yet. As I checked the Wager Talk live odds screen early in the week, 28 is the total. And yes, 28 is a key number, 4 touchdowns, obviously. And it did open as high as 31-32 last week at some advanced lines at some sports books. Quickly came into place this week, and then when all the books went online, and by Monday, 28's across the board. By the way, Army opened about a 2-point favorite, even lower in some spots, now up to 2.5, even 2.5 minus 115, minus 120. So it looks like it could hit that key number of 3 by kickoff on Saturday afternoon. So if you like Army, you probably want to lay the 2.5 now. If you like Navy, I would wait and see if you can get a +3 by kickoff. You know, a lot of time college football teasers are not something we talk about. In fact, they're never a good play for the most part because the lines aren't accurate enough. You want to look at NFL games around key numbers only. However, one thing that makes teasers good, other than covering those key numbers, largely 3 and 7, is when it's a low-scoring game because then you get additional value. And Navy as a teaser actually makes sense in this one, from 2.5 up to +8.5. Or if you can find that +3, use a 7-point teaser and get them up to +10, as it should be a competitive game, a close game, and a low-scoring game. I mentioned this a few weeks ago when Nebraska played Iowa. It was the lowest total in the history of college football, closed as low as 25 in some spots. And I mentioned once again taking the 2-point dog, Iowa, up to +8 made sense. It's one of those rare examples of where a college football teaser works. That game, of course, was 10-10. Iowa kicks a field goal to win at the end of regulation. Otherwise, it would have gone into overtime 2020 and been a bad beat for underbettors. And I bring that up because last year's game between Army and Navy was a bad beat for underbettors. 42 and 10 under, and that includes an overtime over last year, a game that would have stayed under. Army-Navy last year lands 20-17 if you look at the final score, but that was extremely misleading because the game was at 20 at the end of regulation. They put up 17 points in overtime, and that's why it ended up going over the total of 32. Would have landed 20 otherwise. The year before landed 30. The year before that landed 15-0. But then the games before that, 38 points, yes, in 2019. But then we look at the games before that, 27 total points in both 18 and 17. So for the most part, take out the overtime. Every game but 2 has been 27 or lower the last 6. A couple of them was at 30 and 38. They definitely are pricing this one low. So the question becomes, is there any value left with the under? Well, we talked about this a lot with the Iowa Hawkeyes over the last couple months. They can't set the totals low enough. You know, Iowa had the 2 lowest totals in the history of college football, 2 out of the last 3 weeks of the regular season, and they both stayed under the total. The Michigan-Iowa game was at 35 last week for the Big Ten Conference Championship. Iowa failed to score in that one. It stayed under again. Iowa went under 8 straight games down the stretch, even though those totals got lower and lower. They just couldn't set them low enough. And that's been the case with Army-Navy games and the military games in general, yet this is the lowest total ever. But once again, more games than not have stayed under this year over the past 6-8 years in the Army-Navy series. So once again, if you're going to look at the total, it might be low, but it's low for a reason. Under 28 is probably the way to play it. And once again, all unders now 42 and 10 between Air Force, Army, and Navy going back to 2006. And once again, I think Navy makes a good teaser selection up to +8.5, or if you get that 3, take a 7-point teaser, get them up to +10 in what should be a low-scoring close game. By the way, if you're new to the channel, if you haven't heard my analysis of the other games this year, Army, Air Force, Navy, Air Force, in which I mentioned this under trend, the reason it works is quite simple. Both teams run the triple option. They run the ball basically every play of the game. They hardly ever throw the ball. Navy does throw a little bit more than average this season, 15 pass attempts, Army 14 pass attempts, but that's also because they were down big in a lot of games this season and had to play from behind. In competitively priced games, they usually run the ball a lot more. In fact, look at Army against Coastal Carolina a couple weeks ago, their last game 2.5 weeks ago. They only threw the ball twice, 0 for 2, 6 pass attempts against Holy Cross, and only 9 against Air Force. Navy, meanwhile, did throw a lot against SMU, but they got blown out by 45. They had to throw the ball. The games before that, 3 games before that, 11, 10, and 14 pass attempts. They won 2 of those 3. Both teams see the triple option in practice, and both teams are familiar with defending it. Coaches, staffs are very familiar with it, and that's one of the reasons the unders have been such easy money over the years. But once again, we look back at the history of this, going back to 2006 or 2010, even let's do 2 decades ago. The average total was in the high 40s, even low 50s at times. In fact, it took all the way up until just going back to 2020, the Air Force Navy game had a total of 47 just 3 years ago. So you can see how this has drastically dropped. But once again, more games than not, it still stayed under this in the recent series between Army and Navy. They know each other well. And one other thing I'll point out, both teams run the ball obviously all the time. Navy did have the better rushing attack this year. Actually, both teams averaged 4.4 yards per rush, over 200 yards, 4.4 yards per rush, but they had the better rush defense, is what I meant to say. Navy allowed just 3.7 yards per rush. Army allowed 5.0, so maybe that'll be the difference. And another reason why I think Navy makes a decent teaser selection in this game is they did have the better run defense overall. All right, a couple ways to play the game. Hope you enjoy the game on Saturday. It's the one standalone Division 1A football game. And of course, the bowls are right around the corner. By the way, if you're considering the bowl season, the bowl special is up right now on my page, SteveMerrillWagerTalk.com, or the best value is the All Sports All Access special for the rest of 2023. $199 gets you every basketball and football play for the rest of this calendar year, and that there's no promo code needed. And that offer is good this week, the entire week. But the sooner you get on board, the more days you get included, because it's $199 whether you sign up today, tomorrow, the next day. Got to sign up this week, but why wait? Get on board right now for $199. Get the rest of 2023, every college football, pro football, basketball, college, and pro as well. Number 1 in college hoops a couple years ago, off to a great start this year. I am number 1 this year in the NBA this calendar year, and also number 1 the last 2 years combined in college and pro football sides. Not a bad time to try out all sports and get it for a very special price. Works out to just about $7.50 a day for every football and basketball play. My personal best bet, Steve Merrill, WagerTalk.com. Get there quicker with shortcut wt.buzz/sm. Don't forget I post free plays daily on my page as well, also on Instagram and Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at Steve Merrill, 2 R's, 1 L. And stay tuned right here to Wager Talk TV for more great college and pro football preview videos coming up next.